Drop a like and do share. Leave your comments and do not forget to subscribe for more videos.
Hello students, welcome to adptable.com, your online gateway to the world of invaluable knowledge. In our last discussion, we tried to understand at how exactly the concept of the present value of the future stream of uneven cash flows using the method of discounting is being utilized, is being harnessed to assess the capital budgeting decisions. We tried to understand with the help of a simple numerical that how exactly the present value calculations is helping the finance manager in taking a decision regarding the purchase of a capital asset. We've also tried to see that how exactly the present value calculation, the discounting method, is helping in ascertaining the viability of the project on the basis of the net present value. In a very brief fashion, we discussed the concept of the gross present value and the net present value, and time and again we reiterated upon the point that the net present value happens to be one key criteria based upon which the viability of the project is justified, the viability of the asset is justified in the balance sheet in the business. In a nutshell, we tried to see that in the absence of the net present value, in the absence of creation of the long-term wealth, a particular asset is not required, or rather it is useless for a particular business. So now students, in this particular session we shall be taking forward the concept of the present value calculations, but this time we shall be trying to study the usefulness of the present value calculation in light of another stream of a cash flow which is known as annuity. So students, till now we have studied the application of the present value calculation in terms of your lump sum payment. We tried to study the application of the present value calculation in terms of the fractured stream of an uneven cash flow. So this is a time when we shall be talking about the usefulness of the present value calculation in terms of the annuities. So students, what exactly are annuities? We have discussed it in great detail when we were discussing about the calculation of the future value of annuity. Still, since the topic in question right now is annuity, let's have a quick recap which will help in refreshing your memory. So annuities, as the name suggests, or rather as we discussed, refer to a stream of fixed cash flow, a stream of predictable fixed cash flow taking place at the end of the year for n number of stipulated time periods. Once again student, annuity refers to a stream of a fixed cash flow which is taking place at the end of the year for n number of stipulated time period. We have also seen students that it is not mandatory for the cash flows to take place only at the end of the year. They may take place at the beginning of the year at the same time, but when the cash flows are taking place in the form of an annuity in the beginning of the year, they are no longer known as annuity, but they are known as annuity due. Okay, regarding annuity due we shall be talking about a bit later. So right now let's concentrate, or let's focus our discussion in the case of annuities also. Rather, in this particular session we shall be trying to understand that how exactly the present value computation helps in valuing the annuities. Now students, let's try to understand very carefully a very important point, a simple yet very important point. The formula for calculating the future value of an annuity was Fn is equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. Now students, try to understand one thing. When we are depositing an fixed annual amount at the end of every year for n number of years against I% rate of interest, obviously we are getting a future value of an annuity, for which we just mentioned the formula. Now if we try to calculate the present value of those annual cash flows which have been made for n number of years against I% rate of interest, obviously we shall be getting a sum total of the present value of the future annuities. Now this particular sum total or the present value of the future annuities, I once again repeat students, the present value of the future annuities, the sum total of the present value of the future annuities represent a lump sum amount which, if deposited for the same n number of years against a same I% rate of interest compounded annually, but as a lump sum, then the future value shall become the same. Once again, students, the present value of the future annuities is in some way or the other, it is the sum total of the lump sum amount which, if deposited for n number of years across I% rate of return, shall yield the same balance as what has been yielded by the future amount of an annuity. Try to understand this point, students. Step number 1, whatever annual contribution has been made for the future, we calculate the future value using the formula Fn is equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. Now, the present value of that particular stream of annuities, the present value of the stream of annuities for n number of years and against I% rate of interest shall give us the present lump sum value of the annuities. And that lump sum value of the annuity is the same amount which, if deposited as a lump sum across n number of years against I% rate of interest, shall yield the same balance at the end of the nth year, which has been arranged or which has been accumulated by the future value of the annuity. So in effect, we are trying to say, students, that formula wise also, future value of a lump sum is what? Future value of a lump sum is equal to F is equal to P multiplied by within bracket 1 plus I raised to the power of n. So this formula, that is P within bracket 1 plus I raised to the power of n, will be exactly equal to Fn is equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. Once again, students, try to listen to me very carefully. Formula wise, if we try to represent this particular concept, it shall look as the future value of both the cash flows. It means the future value of the lump sum cash flow shall be equal to the future value of the annuity. So, for the future value of a lump sum cash flow, we use P into 1 plus I to the power of n, and against the future value of an annuity, we use A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. So, by representing it in a form of an equation, it will be P within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n will be equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole bracket close upon I. So, in effect, we are showing that the future value of a lump sum shall be equal to the future value of the annuity. Now, students, is it possible that we shall be using one value for the future value and another one for the annuity value? Absolutely not. So where exactly did we get this present value for which we are trying to calculate the future value of a lump sum? So let's try to understand it once again. As I said, student, step number 1 is what? That we are calculating the future value of the annuity which is being deposited at the end of every year for the next n number of years. So we are getting the future value of an annuity, which is A multiplied by 1 plus I raised to the power n bracket close minus 1 whole upon I. So this is step number 1. And step number 2, the same annuities against which we have just calculated the future value, if we calculate the present value of those annual stream of earning, I repeat, students, if we calculate the present value of the future stream of the annuity earnings and add them all together, then we shall be getting the present value of the future stream of annuity cash flows. Now, the sum total of the present value of the future annuity cash flows will represent one lump sum amount. It will be the same amount, the same lump sum amount, if we invest as a lump sum for the same n number of years against the same I% rate of the interest, shall yield the same result as what has been yielded under step number 1, that is as a future value of the annuity payments. So in order to represent it in the form of a formula, so the future value of a lump sum will be P into 1 plus I to the power of n. So where did we get this P? where did we get this P from? That is the present value. So this present value is nothing, but this present value is the present value of the sum total of the future annuity cash flows which has been made for n number of years against I% rate of return. Once again, student, the P in the formula, the first side of the formula wherein we are trying to calculate the future value of the present lump sum. So this present lump sum has been obtained as the present value of the annuity, future annuity stream of earnings which have been taken place against n number of years for I% rate of interest. So this present value of the future annuity represents a lump sum, which again, if it is being invested for the same n against the same I% rate of return as a lump sum investment, it shall yield a future value, and that future value shall be exactly equal to the future value of the same stream of annuities against which we have calculated the present value for n number of years across I% rate of interest. Very layman's term, what does it mean? It means that the present value of the future stream of the annuity cash flows represents the same amount which, if invested as a lump sum for the same n number of years against I% rate of interest, shall yield the identical result as the future value of the same annuities which have been invested for the same n number of years against I% rate of interest. This simple explanation shall be more clear to you the moment we take it up with the help of an example and we try to represent it in form of an equation. Now students, on basis of this, let's try to see what has been flashing in front of your eyes. The concept of annuity and its application in the context of future value has already been discussed. Yes, we have discussed this thing. So the present value concept can be used extensively to compute the present value of the future annuity cash flows. Yes, because annuities are also under the category, they belong to the family of a stream of cash flows. Annuities also belong to the category of a stream of cash flows. The only difference being that unlike the uneven stream of cash flows, unlike the uneven, unpredictable cash flow pattern, annuities represent more systematic, or rather it is a fixed cash flow pattern wherein either at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, as the case may be, the amount of the cash flows are absolutely fixed and the n is also a fixed period against an I% required rate of return. Now the third point, students, try to pay attention. Before deriving the formula for present value of a future annuity, it should be understood that the present value of the annuity is the amount which have to be deposited in one lump sum today at the same compound interest in order to produce the same balance at the end of n years. This is the same thing which I have been discussing with you in this particular session. So let's have a look once again. Before deriving the formula for present value of a future annuity, it should be understood that the present value of the annuity is the amount which have been deposited in one lump sum today at the same compound interest rate in order to produce the same balance at the end of n years. So once again, students, it should be understood that the present value of the annuity. So when we try to understand it from the stepwise, the step number 1 was to calculate the present value of the future annuities. So the sum total of the present value of the future annuities shall represent a lump sum amount, that the present value of the annuity is the amount which have to be deposited. So what exactly are we depositing? So what is the amount which we are depositing over here? This amount refers to the sum total of the present value of the annuity. So the sum total of the present value of the annuity shall be the amount which have to be deposited at the present time in one lump sum. It has to be treated as one lump sum. This particular investment has to be done in one lump sum at the same compound interest, that is the I which we use for the annuity, and for the same n number of years to produce the same balance at the end of n years. What is the meaning of the word the same balance? The same balance means the balance of the future value of the sum total of the present amount of the annuities should be exactly identical to the future value of the stream of annuities. So in a way of expressing it as a formula, let's try to see. Before we see the formula, let's try to understand another point. Suppose annuity deposits of $A are made at the end of year n number of years at an interest rate of I. Let's take a hypothetical case. it is being told that suppose annuity deposits every year, at the end of the year, annuity deposits of A are being deposited. Suppose annuity deposits of $8 are made at the end of year for n number of years at an interest rate of I, then the future value formula we all know, then the future value of the annuity shall be Fn is equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 raised upon I. We all know that this formula represents the future value of the stream of the annuities. It means that if A number of dollars are being deposited for n number of years as an annuity for against I% rate of interest, then the future value of the annuity, that is Fn, shall be A into 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. On the other hand, if P dollars are deposited for the same n years, now the question arises, where exactly did we get this P dollars from? So let's try to look at the answer. Let's try to find the answer. On the other hand, if P dollars are deposited for the same n years, so what is the meaning of the word same n years? So same n years refers to this n number of years for which the annuity has been given effect to. So it means that on the other hand, if P dollars are deposited for the same n years and exactly I% rate of interest, exactly the same I% rate of interest, the future value of the lump sum, the future value of the lump sum. So where did we get this future value of the lump sum from? So this future value of the lump sum is the P. So the future value of the lump sum shall be Fn is equal to P into 1 plus I to the power of n. So what is this P? So this, we need to calculate the future value for this P, and this P is the present value. This P is the present value of the future stream of the annuities which we calculated. So step number 1, we look at the annuity stream, then we try to convert the annuities to their present value, which shall give us the P. Step number 3, we try to calculate the future value of the annuity by using this particular equation. And then at the last step, at the penultimate step, the present value of the future stream of annuities, if we are investing it against the same n number of years against the same % rate of interest, then we shall be getting an future value of a lump sum which shall be exactly equal to the future value for the annuity stream of cash flows. It means the Fn, that is the present value of the sum total of the annuities, multiplied by 1 plus I to the power of n, that is the future value of the lump sum. So this lump sum represents the sum total of the present value of the future annuity cash flows. This shall be exactly equal to the future value which shall be obtained by the annuity against n number of years for I% rate of interest. So once again, students, the future value of the annuity means what? The future value of the annuity is being represented by this particular formula, and then we convert the present value of the same annuity. The moment we calculate the present value of the annuities, we arrive at the sum total of the present values, which represents the present lump sum amount. And secondly, thirdly, if we reinvest the same lump sum present amount of the annuities again back for the future for I% rate of interest against n number of years, the result for the future value of such a lump sum will be exactly equal to what we received by calculating the future value of the annuity for the same number of years against the same I% rate of interest. So thus, if we try to represent this discussion in the form of an algebraic equation, we find that P into 1 plus I to the power of n should be equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I bracket close. It means, in effect, it means that the future value of the lump sum should be exactly equal to the future value of the annuity. So where did we get this lump sum P from? Once again, students, this P has been received by converting the annuity stream of cash outflows to its respective present amount against n number of years and I% rate of interest. The moment we get the sum total of the present values and the moment we reinvest the sum total of the present value as one lump sum for the same n number of years for against I% rate of interest, so whatever future value we shall be getting for this lump sum shall be equal to the future value of the annuity which we receive. So P into 1 plus I to the power of n, that is the future value of one lump sum, should be exactly equal to the future value of the annuity. This present value has been received by converting the present values of the same annuities whose future value we have computed. So in effect, we can say that the present value of the future annuity stream of the cash flows represents the amount which, if being invested as one lump sum for same n number of years against same I% of interest will accumulate or help in accumulating the same future amount, which will be exactly equal to the future value of the annuity cash flows. That is, the future value of a lump sum is exactly the same as the future value of an annuity for exactly same number of years and same rate of interest compounded annually. Once again, students, this entire discussion can be summed up, it can be summarized by saying that the future value of a lump sum is exactly the same amount as the future value of an annuity for exactly same number of years and same rate of interest compounded annually. Now let's try to take up a simple example which will make you understand this entire concept in a more lucid manner. The example says, suppose Mr. Smith borrows 70,000 USD from a bank at a mortgage loan for buying a house property. So try to understand this question very carefully, students. Suppose Mr. Smith borrows 70,000 USD from a bank as a mortgage loan for buying a property. He is required to mortgage the house and pay an annuity of 11,396.93 USD. He is required to mortgage the house and pay an annuity of 11,396.93 USD for a period of 15 years at an interest rate of 14% compounded annually. The question says that suppose Mr. Smith borrows 70,000 USD from a particular bank as a mortgage loan for buying a house property. He is required to mortgage the house property and pay an annual amount, that is an annuity of this amount, that is 11,396.93 USD for a time frame of 15 years at an interest rate of 14% compounded annually. So a closer look shall reveal that the 70,000 USD that Mr. Smith is borrowing represents the present value, because the 70,000 USD, although it is being taken from the bank by Mr. Smith, the cash is coming in his hand at T0. Right now the cash is coming to his hand, the journal entry being cash account debit to bank loan. So cash amount of 70,000 USD is being received by Mr. Smith at the present time, or T0. And against 70,000 USD, he is trying to buy a house property, he is trying to buying a residential flat. But he has to mortgage the flat with the bank. Why he has to mortgage the property? He has to mortgage the property because this is not his own fund, but this is the borrowed fund which Mr. Smith has taken from the bank in order to purchase the house property. So obviously it goes by saying that unless Mr. Smith is repaying off the loan, that is the principal amount as well as the interest amount completely, the house property ownership title won't be passed in the hands of Mr. Smith. So for the time being, it has been mortgaged, it has been hypothecated with the bank, with the mortgage bank. But now the bank says that the bank is asking Mr. Smith to repay the loan through a stream of annuity payments. So Mr. Smith is required to repay the loan to the bank in the form of an annuity whose amount stands at 11,396.93 USD. It means against the loan of 70,000 rupees lump sum which Mr. Smith has taken right now in order to buy a property which stays mortgaged in the hand of the bank, he has to pay an annuity of 11,396.93 USD every year for the next 15 years. So for the next 15 years, Mr. Smith has to pay an annuity of 11,396.93 if he wants to get his house property freed from the clutches of the bank. And the required rate of return is 14% compounded annually. So can we try to apply the same concept which we discussed a short time ago? I think we can. Now, if we suppose that Mr. Smith wishes to pay off the loan in a lump sum mode. Now, listen to this very carefully, student. This simple sample will set the entire thing free in your mind. If we suppose that Mr. Smith wishes to pay off the loan in a lump sum mode, then the future value of 70,000 at 14% interest for 15 years shall be this particular amount, that is 4,99,660 USD. So how did we get this amount? If Mr. Smith wishes to pay it through an annual amount, he has to pay this amount as an annuity for the next 15 years against 14% interest rate compounded annually if he wants to see off this entire loan from his balance sheet. But secondly, Mr. Smith might say that he might opt for a lump sum repayment rather than going by an annuity repayment. Mr. Smith might enter into an agreement with the bank in which he might have said that instead of paying an annuity amount for the next 15 years for 14%, Mr. Smith chooses to repay the loan or pay off the loan in one lump sum against 14% rate of interest and for 15 years. So instead of opting for an annuity, payment, Mr. Smith says that I would like to repay the loan in one lump sum, but only the tenure of the cash flow is changing. Dear students, you might take cognizance of the fact that neither the rate of interest is changing nor the number of years is changing. Both the rate of interest as well as the number of years stands constant at 14% and 15 years respectively. So what is changing? The pattern of cash flows is changing. So if the cash flow pattern of bank has to be accepted, then the loan needs to be repaid by way of an annuity or an annual repayment of the interest as well as the principal. But instead of going with that particular way, Mr. Smith opts for repayment of the loan in one single go or in one single lump sum. But that doesn't mean that he is trying to shorten the length of his loan period or he is trying to pay a higher interest to the bank. No, both the variables are staying the same. But instead of repaying the loan in one annuity installment, he is willing to repay the loan in the form of a lump sum repayment. So going by the formula, Fn is equal to P into 1 plus I to the power of n. So we need to calculate the future value of 70,000. So the future value of 70,000 will give us what? The future value of a 70,000 shall be giving us the amount or the loan repayment amount or the amount which shall be paid by Mr. Smith at the end of the 15th year against a 14% rate of interest, which shall set him free from the liability. So it means that if he is borrowing 70,000 USD right now against a house mortgage, then for the next 15 years, for the time frame of 15 years against a rate of interest of 14% compounded annually, the future value of the lump sum loan, the future value of a lump sum, that is 70,000 loan, shall be the Fn is equal to 70,000 into 1 plus 0.14 to the power of 15. So I'm sure, student, that by now this formula is quite very clear in your mind, so I'm not repeating myself. I'm just saying that I'm just putting the variables at the respective places and trying to calculate the future value. So the future value will be P. P is what? That is 70,000 USD into 1 plus 0.14, that is 1.14 raised to the power of 15. So if we refer to the future value of a lump sum table, so we shall be getting the future value of 1 USD against a 14% rate of interest for the next 15 years as 7.183. So if we multiply 7. What is the 7.183? Once again, student, the 7.183 refers to the future value of a lump sum of 1 USD against a 14% rate of interest for the next 15 years. So this shall fetch us an amount of 7.138. So if you multiply 7.138 with the current loan of 70,000, then we shall be arriving at this particular figure. So the future value of 70,000 USD as a lump sum against I% rate of interest for the next n number of years is 4,99,660 USD. So if Mr. Smith wants to repay the loan in a form of a lump sum payment, he will have to pay this particular amount. Now, if he chooses to repay the loan in the form of an annuity, so if Mr. Smith wishes to go by the condition of the bank and agrees upon paying the loan paying off the loan in the form of an annuity, then as per the formula, the future value of the annuity shall be as follows. We know that how to calculate the future value of an annuity using the formula. So the future value of a formula will be Fn is equal to A into 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. Therefore, since we know that the annuity amount stands at 11,396.93. We need to calculate the future value of this particular amount. So putting the variables at the respective places, future value of an amount, this amount, into 1.14 to the power of 15 minus 1 whole upon 0.14. So by the calculation, by working it out, we find that the future value of an annuity is 4,99,674, which is almost, which can be taken up as an approx by rounding off the figures. So what we find that the future value of the annuity is exactly equal to future value of the lump sum. Thus we see that once again, student, the future value of the annuity is exactly equal to the future value of the lump sum. So it means what? This present value which we got over there, that is 70,000, when it is increasing by I% rate of return for n number of years, it is giving us 4,99,660, and the same amount is being obtained when Mr. Smith is opting for repayment of the annuity amount against the same number of years and the same rate of interest. So both the figures are fetching him the same amount. Other way to understand this thing is that if Mr. Smith has to calculate the present value of the annuity, the present value of the annuity of 11,396.93 against a rate of interest of 14% for the next 15 years, his present value should be 70,000 USD. In other words, students, once again, if Mr. Smith has to calculate the present value of the annuity of 11,396.93 for 15 years against 14% rate of interest, then his present value shall be 70,000 rupees. And if this 70,000 rupees can be represented as this P, or the present value of the lump sum, which if we are reinvesting it against I% rate of interest for n years as a lump sum, we are getting this particular amount, and this particular amount is absolutely identical to what we got by converting or by calculating the future value of the annuities, which is at the amount of 11,396.93 and 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. I hope this is clear, students, and if this is clear, then the derivation of the formula becomes very simple. By understanding the conceptual framework and by looking at this simple numerical, we can conjure that. Thus you can see that P 1 plus I to the power of n, that is the future value of a lump sum, is exactly equal to the future value of an annuity, that is A 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I. So now we solve for this P in the equation in order to calculate the present value of the annuity. So how it is happening? It is simple calculation. If P 1 plus I to the power of n is equal to A within bracket 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 whole upon I, therefore P taken on this side, A, this equation remains the same, 1 plus I goes underneath, therefore P 1 plus I n minus 1 whole upon I into 1 plus I raised to the power minus n. We can write it as minus n, or we can write it as 1 by 1 plus I also. Once again, student, we can write it as minus n also, or better, we can write it as 1 upon 1 plus I to the power of n. Now, P is equal to A into, so this term is A is independent, A multiplied by 1 plus I minus n within bracket 1 plus I n minus 1. Therefore, A 1 plus I minus n multiplied by 1 plus I n minus A 1 plus I minus n into 1, that is A 1 plus n minus n. So students, again, A, since the base is common, the base is, that is 1 plus I and 1 plus I is common, so the powers get added. So when 1 plus 1 is being added, 1 plus 1 is being taken common, and minus n plus n is 0. Therefore, it ultimately looks as A into 1 plus I raised to the power 0. So we know any base raised to the power 0 is ultimately 1. So 1 multiplied by A is A. I hope this is clear. Once again, student, since the base is the same, we are adding the power. Upon adding the power, it works out as A into 1 plus I raised to the power 0. So any base raised to the power 0 is 1. Therefore, A into 1 is A. So A minus A, 1 plus I to the power of minus n upon I. Therefore, P is equal to A taken common, 1 minus 1 plus I to the power minus n whole upon I. So now, once again, student, P is equal to A. As I said, instead of writing 1 plus I raised to the power minus 1, we can write it as 1 minus 1 upon 1 plus I to the power of n upon I. Since P is equal to 1 by 1, this is a simple solving of the algebraic equation. P is equal to A within bracket 1 by 1 minus 1 by 1 plus I to the power n by I. Upon undertaking the entire solution, we are arriving at this particular figure, that is present value is equal to A into 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 upon I 1 plus I to the power of n. I hope this discussion is clear, student. The concept is clear. In the next session, we shall be trying to understand this formula better, and we shall be trying to solve a few more numericals. Thank you for being a patient listener. Thank you.